Welcome, our impressionable audiences, to the third episode of our podcast, The Global Overpass, where we debate and deliver the best hard-hitting analysis of political, social, and cultural issues in current news stories from across the globe. My name is Michael Poon, and here again is my co-host, Andy St. John.
Hello, everyone. In this third episode, we have tons to cover this week from the west to the east. To give a brief intro to our podcast seeks to educate, debate, and analyze political, social, and cultural issues with the overall goal of allowing the public to understand the global perspective towards contributing to the discussion of global affairs. So who better to be us, to be your guides, two poli-sci and journal students obsessed with news to break down these subjects.
Also, to explain how our podcast works, we review 2 to 3 news stories derived from news articles that have happened before and during the second week of March for this episode that is worth talking about more in detail. Then we discuss, analyze, and debate the news story and hope we could educate or give a little more context to everyone who is listening on the issues that are focused on these news stories. So, for today's episode, we are joined with our first ever guest. Please welcome Meredith Omstead.
Hi, Andy and Michael. It's so nice to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourselves, Meredith.
Yeah, no worries. I met you guys. I mean, you obviously know how I met you, but just for the audience, I met you both during my postgrad at Centennial College when you were in your third year of journalism school. And I'm currently working at the Canadian Press on the digital data desk. So we use data and code to automate journalism. And it's been a really great, about 10 months I've been there. So it's been a really great experience. I've been learning a lot about different forms of journalism and, different types of reporting. But in a few months, I actually am starting at Bell Media in the grad rotational program. So that will be a really cool experience. It's 2 years, and every few months I get to change teams. So I'll get to work at CTV, TSN, The Social, do chase producing, writing, literally anything, marketing, advertising, you name it. So it'll be cool because I'll get to kind of have a more robust experience in the field of journalism.
And how long is that program?
It's 2 years.
2 years. Wow. Mm-hmm. That's great for you. That's awesome.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yes, we all dealt with COVID last year together. So
exactly.
Yeah, we all did online class together last year. So
all right. So Meredith, to know about yourself more for our audience, so we're going to talk about more about your career as a journalist. You started alongside with us, but you are more experienced than both me and Andy. So to start off, is there any issues in general that journalism, news issues that you are passionate about in terms of reporting it or writing news stories about it?
Well, when I was in school, I was really interested in politics, especially I did my undergrad in global studies. So I've always been interested in, social justice and bringing global news stories to local audiences and explaining to people how local things can impact the world and how global things can impact local stories. But right now, something I'm really interested in, just with the job I've currently been doing, is the move from the more contemporary move that journalism is having right now into the digital world. And I'm really interested in kind of the different tools that are being used in the newsroom and how we can teach young journalists, really leverage those skills.
Okay, that's great. The next question I have for you is, what sort of media publications do you follow on your news feed usually?
So I really like the New York Times and this one out of the US called Crooked Media. I don't know if you know it, either of you, but I really like their podcast. They have this one called Pod Save the World, which is like an international policy podcast, which I love, and Michael is smiling because I think I talked about it a lot when we worked together in the Global Summitry project.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I've been following a lot about what CTV is doing because I'm going to be working there soon. Global News, Toronto Star, I follow a bunch of things.
So I would like to know more about your viewpoint. Now we're entering a field of journalism where it's very strange now. It's developing. It's being adapted to this contemporary society where we're adapting new technologies. We're being more aware about new social issues, and the work of journalists is to report on them in maybe in an objective way or in an opinionated way. So, to your viewpoint, what is the current state on the field of journalism right now?
It's a loaded question. I think I'm going to start by like answering the part about, the changes in technology. Um, so it's no secret that there's been a lot of layoffs recently in the Canadian journalism market. I mean, HuffPost Canada just fully got rid of their newsroom here
Yeah, that's true.
last week, and it's really disheartening as young journalists, I think, to see all the changes that are happening, because journalism is more important now than ever, in the sense that we have so many competing forces with good reporting. We have social media, and fake news, quote unquote, can be spread so quickly. So, we really, really need to invest in good local reporting to uphold democracy. I think that's so important. And with more newsrooms, local newsrooms shutting down, it can be really difficult to be able to keep up with the demand that's needed. So something that I really love that I'm doing right now is I'm working on a team that automates stories, and we can really automate stories for local markets. For example, we created a BC election result tool that during the BC election wrote automated stories for every riding in BC. So instead of having local reporters have to do the go out and do the stories, we were able to just do it automatically. And that was so helpful because, it freed up time for reporters. So I think it's really important to invest in that technology and train young journalists to be able to use that and learn how to code and learn how to do alternative forms of journalism to keep up with the changes and the changing demand in the industry.
That's interesting to point out your current work that were you in charge of this team or you're involved in this team that was reporting on this BC election?
I'm on the team, so it's a digital data desk at the Canadian Press, and I'm a my my role title is editorial assistant, but essentially I'm kind of like the liaison between journalists and software developers and coders. So I write story templates and get all the data, and then they, code the stories and automate them. So it's cool because it's, helping fill some gaps, but I think there's a lot of pushback with, journalism management to have this new digital revolution in the newsroom. I mean, I could go on and on about this, like how Toronto Star they just invested in casinos. Did you see that? Like online casinos?
I did not see that. No, I keep getting ads for it though. I
Yeah,
know the one you're
so,
talking about. Yeah,
but it's just crazy how much the landscape is shifting. And honestly, Michael, I forget your original question, so I hope that answers it.
that's totally okay.
Um, yeah, that totally answers it. And to continue, I do want to get your opinion on this because now that you are a working journalist in this field of journalism, everyone is trying to enter this field of journalism in a very respected way. So, in your experience, or in your opinion, or in just like your knowledge of what you've learned so far, like, what are the qualities that makes a good journalist?
um, so I think the first thing that makes a really good journalist is being adaptable. Um, you know, in journalism school, they taught us that the mediums will always change, but the storytelling will always stay the same. So being adaptable to the mediums, but being a very good storyteller. I think what also makes a good journalist is that you're able to work really quickly and under deadlines. Like there's a lot of pressure in the industry, and right now my team isn't in the daily news cycle, but at any second my boss could say, I need this by the end of the day, go do it. So just being able to work under tight deadlines is also extremely important. And I think the last one is just like being good at working with people. This is our job, like interviewing, and you have to be good at asking questions. You have to be good at getting information and building relationships with others.
So, I guess like one last question. So, just in the interest of all the audiences who do listen to this podcast episode, so are there any future projects, ideas, or any work that you would like to pursue?
I'm just really looking forward to my time at Bell Media. I'm really, really excited to. I mean, I've loved my time at the Canadian Press, as I said, but I feel really pigeonholed into data journalism right now. And just being at the beginning of my career, I really want to try out different parts of journalism in the actual newsroom, not just in school. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Bell Media is going to adapt to the change in the industry. And they just bought Environics, which is a huge Canadian data company. I'm excited to see how they're going to implement data sets into their storytelling. That's something I love. Um, so yeah, those are the projects I'm excited for. Just running around the Bell Media newsrooms really for 2 years.
That's awesome. And now that you're our first guest, we would like to hope that you'll be able to adapt to our podcast format. So, and since me, and Andy, we are fans of politics, so let's dive into our first topic of our podcast episode.
which is the stimulus bill.
Yes, the stimulus bill and the article that we are deriving this topic from. It is by the Washington Post. The title is called What's in Congress's $1.9 trillion COVID bill? Checks, unemployment insurance, and more. And it's written by Rachel Siegel. And just to give a brief description of this article, so the United States House, has passed a $1.9 trillion stimulus plan on Wednesday. And this plan is called the American Rescue Plan. And to give the main points of this plan, so essentially, the legislation will send 1,400 US dollars checks to most Americans who are part of this plan, who are eligible for this plan. And also, this bill, it essentially extends unemployment insurance, and it allocates billions of dollars for coronavirus testing and all. And it is one of the largest economic stimulus packages in the United States history.
I think it's actually the largest, from what I understand.
It might be the largest now. I think
Yeah.
so too. So, to start off, Meredith, since you're our first guest ever, um, what is your take on this? What is your opinion on this?
I think it's an amazing, amazing thing for the US to be doing. I think it's such a great place to start, and I'm so happy to see that after 4 years of Trump and so much government shutdown, the US is finally bringing back big government. I was saying earlier in the interview that I love Crooked Media, and they have this podcast called Pod Save America and Pod Save the World, but Pod Save America. And there's this host on it, Tommy Vitor, and he was talking about how we need to continue the anti-Reagan policies. So, like anti-neoliberalism, bring back big government, and really help people because people need this relief. They are really, really struggling, not just because of COVID, but also just because America is really an every man and woman and human for their self society. And I think it's really great to see the government finally stepping in and helping people, especially who are part of these marginalized communities that have really, really suffered over the past year and prior to that.
Interestingly, so this stimulus bill, so the main points of it is that it will send Americans a $1,400 check. And I'm not Canadian. So, and I'm an immigrant here, I'm a student here. So, I'm not sure about you, Meredith. I know that Andy, you were eligible for the Canadian version of the stimulus check, the CERB,
Oh yes, I
CERB.
was. Yeah, I haven't I haven't been on curb since Yeah, I haven't been on Curb since last July, where I got a pretty good, decent paying job. So I've been working a lot myself right now. So I worked at Loblaws, Walmart, and I'm currently at McDonald's. McDonald's during a pandemic is very interesting, but that's a topic for another time. I have to wear a face shield and a face mask on top of that.
Wait, Andy, to point out though, I want to see this comparison here because it's interesting to point out. So this 1.9 trillion stimulus plan is giving 1,400 US dollars to the
Hmm.
Americans. For Canadians, their stimulus plan check, it was, well, not was, it's still like 2,000 Canadian dollars.
Well, I don't even know what's going on. There's the Canadian recovery benefit right now. I don't know how that quite works. And then there's also, I think they transition people off of CURB or CERB, as I like to call it, to EI benefits, which is like employment insurance or unemployment insurance. So my thoughts on the stimulus bill. I think it's great that they finally passed it. I think it took way too long. I think they're dilly dallying on it for way too long. I mean, so many people are just in suffering right now. I think they took way too long on it. The only other real criticism I have of it is that they dropped the $15 minimum wage because that would even help even more along with the stimulus bill.
But to interestingly point out, though, I want to put this out because there's a 600, I know it's like a different currency, but comparing to 1,400 US dollars to 2,000 Canadian dollars, there's still a gap. And we know that each citizen they have bills to pay. They have to pay their electricity bills, water bills, they have to pay for oil, they have to pay for, their rent, they have to pay for food. So I know there's not too much of a difference, but is there? Like, it's interesting to point out a few couple of dollars could help a lot, but whether it's this $1.9 trillion stimulus plan, is it enough? I think that's the main question. Is it enough to survive this pandemic?
I mean, no, like the answer is of course it's not enough, but it's better than what Trump would have done. And like, out of the 1.9 trillion dollars, 424 billion dollars are just in stimulus checks. So that's almost a quarter. I'm looking at a pie chart right now, so it's almost a quarter of the pie chart. And it's not enough. And another thing is that it only applies to individuals earning $75,000 or less a year. Um,
Yeah.
and it disappears for individuals earning more than $80,000 annually and couples earning more than $160,000 annually. So the difference between this and CERB is that CERB you had to apply for it, but I'm pretty sure the stimulus check it just goes to people based on their income. I mean, I'm not actually sure how people receive it, but check out the recent story that I did with the Canadian Press. I
Oh,
did a huge CERB data analysis about where all the CERB money went. So if you,
what is
I'll
that
send.
story called, Meredith?
I'm not sure because I did the data. I didn't actually do the writing, but I'll send it to you guys. You guys can put it in the episode notes so your audience
Yeah.
can learn more about where CERB went to. But yeah, to answer your original question, it definitely isn't enough. But one thing that they're talking about, and I saw a tweet from Margaret Kimberly on Twitter at Freedom Ride Blog. She said that people are saying the stimulus bill cuts child poverty in half, but it doesn't actually. It's a one-time fix, and it's cutting child poverty in half for 1 year. So, like, unless they continue to do this over and over again, it might help for the short term, but it'll be interesting to see the long term effects. But really, at the end of the day, I think the stimulus bill just is trying to boost the economy.
It's like a defibrillator to the economy. The one thing I
Exactly.
wanted to say is, yeah, it's like a defibrillator to the economy. It's like the one final one. This brings up an interesting point I want to bring up though. This brings up like ideas of like universal basic income. You guys probably know. Uh,
Andrew Chang.
yeah, me and Andrew Yang. Yeah,
Yang.
so
Oh,
Andrew
it
Yang.
is
Andrew
Sorry.
Yang.
interesting. So I think the great thing with Curve is that like
Sorry.
there's monthly payments, so you get $2,000 every month up until a certain point, which was great. That really helped out a lot of people. But the problem is if it's just one time, as you said, Meredith, that creates a whole lot of major issues, I think. So yeah, they gotta make it monthly. Like that was the great thing about Curb up here in Canada. That's another criticism I have of it now when I think about it.
Yeah.
And then dropping the $15 minimum wage, like what's the minimum wage in the United States right now? It's like $7.25 federally or something. It depends on state to state. Like it's something. I think it's even lower in some places. Don't quote me on that, but it's utterly ridiculous. And they got to do it monthly again. I think it's great that they passed it, but yeah, there's just it's politics. You can't really do much about. I mean, we can't do anything about it. We're not American, but all we can do is sit back and watch, right? So
One thing that really bothered me about this whole story is that it hardly passed. Like the bill hardly passed because Republicans didn't want it to pass.
oh, it was terrible. Oh yeah.
And this is something that really, I think, ties in. I mean, I'm not going to transition to the next story because you guys can do that. But something that I think is kind of an underlying theme is that, like, Republicans and just conservatives in most countries just don't want to help people. Like, it's very much every man for themselves. And we don't. Okay, you might not agree, but
I
this
would
is
dispute that last point, but yeah.
the debate. Like, we can debate this, but and that, yeah, it's very much like every man for themselves. They're built on this foundation of like white supremacy and like straight white men can get it all, and they leave a lot of people struggling. And I think that like we need to help people, we need to believe people, and we need to lift people up out of these really hard situations. And a lot of these people that are in these situations are marginalized groups, and we can't dismantle the institutions of racism that we're fighting to dismantle unless and inequity by not pulling people out of poverty, educating people, giving people food. So the fact that like the Republicans didn't want to pass the bill just goes to show that even though they did pass the bill, Americans really, and like the world, has a really, really long way to go before there's any type of equality.
The last one I want to get in there, the Republican Party, I absolutely agree, is like just don't get me started on it. But like I don't know, I thought of Angela Merkel. Like I was trying to think of like a good conservative like leader, and she was the first one that came to mind.
The German Council.
So it's like the more
Yeah, that's true.
sort of more moderate ones, I'd say. Not all conservatives, but this has been a problem ever since like 2016. I mean, we all have lived through the past 5 years of this crap, so it's really become an issue where you just sort of have like these populist and far right elements come in, where that wipes a lot of the more moderate, sensible conservatives, I would say. I mean, I'm not conservative myself. I'm not defending any of their actions, but this does tie to bigger issues, I think. So,
But wait, Andy, I would like to kind of like clarify though. I think it's not like it started at 2016.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
It's been going on for years, but
Yeah, I feel like the polarization of this political associations, it started like, well, not even started. It's been
it
growing.
started since the American Civil War. Like
It started when America was created, and they started slavery. Like that's literally, they've been putting people in these really bad situations and continuing to, especially like racialized groups, be marginalized for so long. And as soon as they try to help people, they still get pushback from Republicans and and conservatives and even liberals. Like people just don't want to lift people out of these really difficult situations. And I don't know why. It really, really, really bothers me.
I would say the one issue that causes it's political lobbying. You have big companies like Big Pharma. I don't mean to sound like a conspiracy theorist. You have Big Pharma. You have not big tech, but you have all these companies that lobby and influence all these politicians. Canada has much more stronger anti-lobbying laws. I mean, we still have issues from lobbying from like the oil sector and industry. The United States, like regardless of the political party, you just have this intense lobbying on behalf of corporate interest and the 1%, as it's called. So,
but I think it's more than that to it though. It's also the corporate association, right? But it's also the priority for each political party in terms of the like more left-sided, political parties. Generally they're more advocating for social issues, a lot of like racialized issues, all that. And for to be more objective, right, for the right side of the political party, they're more traditional in that sense. And it's understandable that a lot of us individuals, we would like to keep some certain traditions alive, even though they kind of like coincide with the current agendas that we would like to set out to make the economy, you know, a boosting economy. But it's also interesting to point out that, we mentioned polarization and it's been growing. It's been growing. And I think it just broken. It just broke the moment that the Republican Party nominated a basically someone who works in the corporate field to be their Republican Party nominee. But to go back to this 1.9 trillion US stimulus plan, like I agree with what you said, Meredith. Not it's definitely not gonna help. Maybe short term wise, but I would like to bring in the question, like, if this 1.9 trillion US plan is like over with, would there be another stimulus plan if we're still under the pandemic, maybe even next year, Hopefully not, but this is like the question I'm presenting right now.
Are you asking if um
Like whether this 1.9 trillion dollar plan, once it's like, because we agree that it's going to be only working for short term,
mhm.
but if we're still in this pandemic, hopefully not.
I think the thing to point out is you had Biden say the other night where we want every adult to be able to be eligible to be vaccinated by May 1st. So I think the thing is what they're counting on is the economy is going to open up more, despite the variants, particularly the UK B117
Wait,
variant, I
though, do
think
you
what it's
think
called.
that's realistic? May 1st?
No, I think it is because they've already vaccinated 100 million people, so they can absolutely do it. Oh yeah, they
10%
can
of,
do it.
yeah, 10% of their
Yeah,
population.
they've done it already. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, they'll get to like half the population, I think, by like the end of this month. Like by the way it's going. So, or even probably, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, they're really speeding up. They're like doing 1 to 2 million doses a day. So and they'll probably hit like 4 million at one point, right? So,
Must be nice.
oh yes, we have four
But
vaccines in Canada now. We have 4 or 5 vaccines, but it is. We've talked about this in previous podcasts, though.
okay.
Yeah.
Um I don't, but to answer your question, Michael, like, it will be interesting. I think that if this plan does actually help the economy and do what it's promising to do, I think that would be a really big win for Democrats to be able to say, here, see, like when we step in, things actually do work. But if it doesn't, for some reason, like if there is still an issue, if Democrats slip up even just a bit, the criticism is just already lined up. People are waiting for this to fail. So I hope I don't know the first part of your question. Like I don't know the answer if they're going to do this again. I don't know if they can afford to. I don't really know the
Yeah.
full financial situation, but I just really hope that it works and it does bring people some like relief, and I hope that America is able to get their economy up and going again, because if they're not from this, it would be really bad for Biden's image. Not because he did anything wrong, but just because Republicans would have easy bait to, yeah, go with.
So, that's been an interesting discussion. So, let's move on to our second topic of today's podcast. And we're still being joined by Meredith, of course. Now, this second topic is going to be quite divisive in terms of perspective, but it's been on the news for the past 1 to 2 weeks, so we have to talk about it. It's a huge news because it's about the context of it. So, the second topic of our podcast for today's episode is about Meghan Markle and Prince Harry from the United Kingdom and their recent interview with Oprah. And this article that we are using for this topic is by the New York Times, and the title is called Under Fire Over Race British media admits there might be a problem. And it's written by Stephen Castle and Isabella Quay. And to give some description about what this article is referring to, so Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, they are the new additions to the royal palace of the United Kingdom. And but they left. They left recently, and they moved to the United States, to my knowledge. And there's some certain issues behind the scenes of why they left. And in this interview with Oprah, Meghan Markle reveals, or she allegedly says, there were certain issues that were going on behind the scenes with her association with certain individuals in the royal palace, and that has to do with her race, that has to do with her kid's race, her kid named Archie. And there's been a lot of divisive perspectives on this. Recently, the one of the anchors on Good Morning Britain, Piers Morgan, he left that show because there were dividing opinions with him and another anchor on that show. So, what do you guys think? I would like to have this discussion start by Meredith. Meredith, you told me that you've been keeping up with this issue that's been going on.
Yeah. So I have a lot of feelings about this. Obviously, I'm going to start this conversation just saying I'm a white woman, so I can't relate to everything that Megan has gone through, and that's just a fact. One thing I can relate to something she's gone through is like mental health struggles, and that's something that we can get into more in our conversation. But I think the main thing that kind of ties back to the last conversation we had is like we need to start believing people's struggles and helping them, I hate that the fallout of this and the fallout of the stimulus bill is like people don't need help, or she wasn't suicidal, she's just making that up for attention. Like, we need to start believing women and marginalized groups. We need to start believing women, and especially women of color. And this article was talking about people need to have the burden of proof for struggle. And even when they provide the proof, they still aren't believed. And I think the bravest thing you can do as a woman, or as a person who's not a rich, abled, straight white man in this world, is to keep existing and fighting to be seen and heard and treated equally despite all the forces that are working against you. And I think that it was incredible for Meghan to have this interview with Oprah and be so candid. And what made me so upset is that, as you were saying, like Piers Morgan and other people were just like doubting her experiences. And we really need to stop doing that. Like, it makes me so angry, because this is why people like die by suicide all the time, because people don't listen to them. And yeah, it makes, so that's how I feel. I thought it was a great interview. I really did not like the pushback from especially right-wing people.
But to be fair, though, Piers Morgan, he actually agreed that when it comes to mental health, there is a priority to fix all that. But he did kind of like emphasize on the integrity of the royal palace. He thinks that the royal palace, the system of it, is not something that would so easily kind of succumb to the social issues where they're questioning um, the polarization between white people and marginalized people and all that stuff. But it's also interesting to point out that this interview, it's been a huge issue. The Meghan Markle versus the royal palace,
Mm-hmm.
and this interview just brought so much about race, and it's just so interesting that it's blown up. I will say to your point though, like certainly, I will say that Meghan Markle, she has been targeted by the British tabloid media numerous times. That's evidently so. Like that's
Hmm.
definitely that's on the media. It's been reported that, and
Yeah.
it's also that she's just always there, and it's just weird. Like why is she always on the tabloid?
Well, The one thing I heard is that people said, "Oh, Meghan didn't know what she was marrying into," and Meghan herself admitted, like, I was naive when I married Harry. I get the two of them confused. The one thing, the one thing,
Yeah,
the
Harry.
one thing I will say though is, if you know anything about William and Harry, my mom's quite the Princess Diana fanatic, so she knows a lot about Diana. So therefore, I know a lot about Diana. If you know anything just about the tragedy of how their mom died when they were young, and he had these two brothers, sort of that were brought together by grief, and they were bound at the hip. And then you hear, I was listening to CNN like 2 days ago, and I heard this report of just how the two brothers have not spoken to each other in like a long time. And it's just, it is, I did find it very sad and a little heartbreaking, just because you have two brothers that were so close. I'm not blaming Meghan for this. It's just, it's a shame to see just two brothers that were so close and loved each other so much to be broken apart. And big thing for them is mental health, and they have been open how they experienced depression after their mom, Princess Diana, died. So it also it is sad to see these two brothers gone. The one other thing I've really struggled with myself with this is, if you know anything about Prince Andrew and all that situation
Yeah.
with Jeffrey Epstein,
Oh.
they protected
Oh,
him
okay.
more than they did Meghan. So, and just describing, like, it really sounds like the film Get Out if I had to describe it. What Megan went through. No, that's
Yeah.
literally what it seems like just sort of trapped and not knowing what to do. Yeah, my thoughts on it. I like the Queen. I mean, I've never had really any issues with her. I don't think it was the Queen herself. I mean, the Queen is a pretty
No,
straightforward
they
lady.
stated that it wasn't the Queen.
Yeah,
That's
it
No,
wasn't
what
the
the
Queen.
it
news
was
said.
sort of more the institution, and she said she tried to go to like the human resources department. I'm surprised they even had a human resources department. Apparently, it's like a workplace. But and she really
I didn't
struggled
know
with her
that
mental health.
either.
Apparently, yeah. So and they didn't help
Yeah.
her. So I think it's more
Yeah,
the institution is what the issue is here. And I don't think,
for sure.
yeah, I don't think the whole family's full of racist. I just think there's a lot of structural issues. You have this old institution that's existed for over, I don't know, what, 1,000 years or something. Now the current royal family have only been around for like the past 200, 300 years, right? So it's just like the whole institution. This is a problem with a lot of other institutions. Like even within here in Canada, you have a lot of systemic racism. Yeah.
Yeah, just like the American political system, right? Like it all ties
Yeah.
back together. It's all based, it was all created on white supremacy. And I think,
Mhm.
like Andy, Meghan didn't know what she was getting into when she married into the royal family, but I don't think when anybody marries into a family, they know what they're getting into. It's not till you're like
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
bound, under God that the family starts spilling their secrets and it's like, oh shit, what did I get myself into? And, now I'm
She
in this
did admit though that
situation.
she was
And
naive about it, so I'll give her that. Like she at least admitted I was wrong when it came to
yeah,
this.
yeah,
So
she did, which is, again, like
which is
anybody
responsible of
really
her.
would be. Unless you literally grew up in the royal family, you're not going to know what you're getting yourself into. Like nothing can prepare you for what she's gone through. And I think, yeah, it's super sad that Harry and William used to be really close and they're not talking anymore. But something, I don't know, did you guys watch the interview?
I've read
I've seen clips of
highlights
it.
of it.
I've seen clips of it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so something that I was very glued to my TV on Sunday night. And
Yeah.
one thing that Harry said that I think really summed it all up is that Oprah, who's like also just the best interviewer of all time, I want to be here when I grow up.
Love
But
Oprah.
he said, Oprah asked Harry, would you have left the family or be in this situation if you hadn't have married Meghan? And he said no, because I didn't know how bad it was until somebody from the outside came in and showed me. And I think that's the issue. I think William is still and Kate and everybody else in the royal family is still so caught up in this bubble of privilege and this and systemic racism and
Yeah.
this institution. And Harry and Meghan got themselves out of it. And it's sad that they're not, I hope that the royal family, I mean, I can only hope, can look themselves in the mirror and be like, we need to change. Just like I hope again, the Republican Party can look themselves in the mirror and be like, it's a bit of an issue if
Well,
we
the
keep.
problem with William though is he's like third in line to be the King of England, so he can't really, unless he wants to pull like a King Edward or something and abdicate. I don't think that's really an option for him, so he is unfortunately trapped. The
But don't
great
you
thing
think
about
he's trapped? But like, don't you think that he could speak out? Like, he's
oh,
somebody that
absolutely,
the
yeah, he should,
British
yeah.
family, the royal family, like uses kind of as their poster boy, right? So
Mhm.
if he was the one to speak out and like denounce the actions of the firm, as they called it, which is, and that conversation about Archie's skin color, like people are assuming that that was William who brought that up, and that's just so sad to me that that was even a conversation that was had, because it just goes to show how archaic like the royal family is. And no wonder Meghan was felt so trapped. And yeah.
So there's been recent responses on this. So essentially, it's that people are asking, why is there still a royal family in this contemporary society? Like
Should we
why
abolish it?
is there
That's the
still a royal
question.
family? That is the question. Should we abolish the royal family? Because
That's
nowadays
what. That's
societies
the
are
point I wanted
mostly
to bring
built
up.
on government. Yeah, like nowadays
Mhm.
society is built by government. America is built by the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. China is built by their own Communist Party. Europe is mostly they have their own party as well, but they also have associations with the EU. But is there still a
Can
need
I
for?
say one thing, Michael?
Yeah, sure.
So most countries in the world are constitutional republics, like they have a president and a prime minister, from what I understand. So I mean, Canada is like Canada and the rest of the Commonwealth countries, and Malaysia is a Commonwealth. Is Malaysia in the Commonwealth still?
Yep, it is.
Yeah. So I mean, what type of government do you have in Malaysia? Are you like a republic, constitutional monarchy? Like what? What are you?
You know what? That's a great question because Malaysia is actually we do have a king. We also have a sultan. So, you know what?
Which is like another version
Yeah,
of a king, though, right?
yeah, exactly. And the thing is, I will say they do have influence over the government in Malaysia. If you are selected a prime minister, it has to be finalized by the king. I think it's the same with the royal family in the United Kingdom as well. However, the media exposure between the both of them is so different. The royal family in the United Kingdom is it's so influential. So I think the question mostly does direct to the United Kingdom's
Mhm.
royal family about whether they still need to be there because the United Kingdom is a developing nation, a developed nation, while
I
Malaysia
was
is
like,
still
developing.
developing.
I would love
Yeah,
to hear all your
develop.
thoughts on. This is my one question. It's related to Michael. Should we still have the royal family in England or the monarchy, the English monarchy? Should we still have it? Should we still have it
I
in
mean,
Canada at least or Malaysia?
no, like I don't think so, but I don't like I'm not really a royal family expert. And I don't love the monarchy, not, as I've said, like really just not a great institution, but I think another huge question that also was pointed out in this article is like about the media coverage of these institutions, Like a huge reason that Meghan was in this situation is because the British tabloids made her seem like the devil. Like they twisted so
Antagonizing
many
her.
stories to cover up, and like as journalists it's our job to report news fairly, and I would never want my reporting to be false, and not only that but so bad that it makes somebody suicidal. Like that's like it makes somebody put somebody in a situation where they literally question their own life.
However, Meredith, though, I would like to say that I think it's like the difference of the genre of journalism reporting. I think when it comes to entertainment newsrooms, their main goal is to get the scoop.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Trying to revive. And since the royal family is so influential, I think it's just like the journalists are just following orders, that they're just trying to get the scoop. And that scoop is Meghan Markle. So you are right though. That is a problem because it does not take account for the person that's being reported on, their mental health. But it also reflects on that question too.
It's like, sure, it's like entertainment, right? But like the royal family aren't the Kardashians, you know?
I think they are the
They
United
are the
Kingdom's.
Kardashians. They're like
Well,
they're like
okay, well then,
the Kardashians. That's basically what they are.
well
But I
then,
at least I have a lot more respect for the Queen than I do Chris Kardashian. So
yeah.
I mean, I personally have mixed feelings about. So if Canada was to cut its ties with the English monarchy, I don't know. I just like the Queen a lot. I have a lot of respect for her as an individual, but at the same time, the institution is very outdated. It's very.
It's traditional.
It can be
It's
very
very
racist,
traditional.
as we've seen in the past week. But I like the Queen. I can't hate on her. But her family, they need to do more about it. I have a lot of respect for her, but the fact that they were defending Prince Andrew more than Meghan is just kind of, yeah, it's not fair. It's not
Yeah,
fair.
it's like don't hate the player, hate the game, right? Like don't hate
Yeah,
the queen,
exactly.
hate the institution. And like again, don't hate Chris Kardashian, hate like billionaires in America. Like
Yeah,
But
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, but to bring a bigger question, because the main issue of this is race. We have like mixed opinions about whether this royal family should exist now, but it does reflect on the bigger question, like the royal family in terms of race. I will say there's been a lot of mixed opinions on whether the phrase where maybe they didn't reveal who asked Meghan Markle about the the skin color of their son, but I've heard recent interviews where they say that sometimes that sentence, that question, isn't phrased from malice. It's the intent of it is not malice. It's just genuine curiosity. But I would like to ask, like you guys. So
I think it's
when you've heard
unintentionally
about this,
racist.
you think it's
Yeah, it's
intentionally
unintentionally racist.
or not
The
intentionally?
way you're describing it. The other thing about Archie I want to point out is I don't know. I saw some article. Apparently, this is false. The one thing is supposedly he wasn't going to get the title of prince, but supposedly that's not meant to happen until Charles ascends to the throne. Like that was not meant to happen. So I mean, apparently that's incorrect information. But don't quote me on that. But that's from what I understand. So
I think Andy, I'm going to debate you here. I think it's extremely intentionally racist.
well,
Yeah.
I think it was intentionally racist, but the way Michael was describing, like, okay, that kind of sounds unintentional.
Like
Like
My
whether
personal
because we
feeling
don't know
is that
who
it
sent
was
the
intentionally
question.
racist. Like, that's clearly, yeah.
I mean, the royal like I don't really know much about like the full history of the royal family and, everything about it,
Just
but
talk to my mom if you want to hear about the royal
yeah,
family.
but I do know that like having a conversation about the child's skin color and him not being a prince is blatantly racist. And I think like
Oh,
white
it is.
suprem
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
and white supremacy is like so ingrained in our culture that people just have these conversations without even thinking twice about it. And I think that's what's crazy. And actually, I love our professor Stacey Lee Kong from
Oh
Centennial,
yeah,
and she has this really really great newsletter called Friday Things. Everybody needs to
yeah.
check it out. And she wrote something recently last week that really stuck with me. It was all about this topic. And again, like as I said at the top of this conversation, I'm a white woman, and I don't have all the answers, and I can't speak for what it's like to be a black woman living in this time. But she said Megan is, as Refinery 29's Kathleen Newman Bremang described her, the most palatable kind of black woman. And then Stacey went on to say, I'm pretty sure her beauty and proximity to whiteness were the only reason she was allowed to join the royal family in the first place. This was never going to be an institution that changed for her. And I just thought that that was so well put because, yeah, Megan is a beautiful human, and she's, and we can't expect that the institution is going to just change because one black person marries into it. It's so rooted in racism and inequality that it it doesn't need to be abolished or like I don't even know if it can be changed. It would take a really long time to change.
It would be
Everybody
very
who's
hard to
currently
change.
living would have to die, and it would have to be recreated from the ground up in order for it to change. So, yeah. Anyways, check out Stacey's newsletter because
Yeah, check it out.
she
It's called
actually
great.
Finding
does
Things.
this commentary so well, and she's an amazing writer.
So to bring a last question to this, and this is like basically, I guess what everyone is thinking. Do you think that Meghan Markle and Prince Harry would ever reconcile with the royal family?
Yes, I think they will. I feel like at the end of the day, they will reconcile some way. I mean, I think with comparing it to the situation with Diana, I still think a lot of that hasn't been reconciled. I mean, that's still a very big stain on the royal family. If you watch the latest season of The Crown, you definitely see that.
Uh-huh.
But I think because William and Harry, they did it because they learned how to get through. They eventually learned how to deal with it. I think the monarchy realized, like, okay, how do we avoid doing really, really bad PR? Because that was the case with Diana. So I feel like naturally they will reconcile somehow. I think I don't know when that will be. It may be tomorrow, a week from now, years. I don't know.
What's your definition of reconcile? Like, what do you mean? Like that they'll talk again, or that they'll be accepted back into the family? Because I think
I hope both.
Like
I think
accepted, I
talking. I
guess.
think they should just start off talking. I feel like that's simple to do. Getting accepted back into the family, that might be quite harder to do because of all the bridges that have they burned. And I'm on the side of more Meghan and Harry at this point, but looking from the royal family's point of view, I can understand, but I don't support. I can understand why they don't want them right back in the royal family right away because they did this huge, explosive bombshell tell-all interview. So it's gonna be a while, I think, before the dust really settles, and I think the monarchy is not going to go away. It's not going to be abolished. People will move on with their lives. I mean, it didn't disappear after Diana, so yeah.
Um, Interestingly, I will say, I'm looking at this as an outsider. I have no relation to any, you know, Western values, Western perspectives. I'm Asian. I'm from Southeast Asia. And I do see like this reconciliation. It could happen. Like they are family, right? And she's basically married into the royal family, but she's left the palace. I will say the image on the royal family, the United Kingdom royal family, it's not looking good. It's not looking good from any perspective around the world. You could be some individual living in Hong Kong or living in South America, and you look at this and you will think it's a hot mess. And that's a bad image. Like Andy mentioned, the imagery of this, the public images, it's going down. It really is. It's not looking good. The Queen, Prince Charles, Prince Andrew, all their past histories, any controversies are being brought up because of this interview. So I guess I do follow what Andy says. I think they are gonna start talking, but whether Megan would join back into the palace, I think that's a different discussion. What do you think, Meredith?
I don't. I just hope that she won't. I'm just so proud.
Oh,
I'm so proud of her, for getting out of there. And it must have been so hard. Like, I cannot even imagine everything she had to go through. I don't know what it would take. Like, I'm trying to think about what it would take for them to go back. And I don't like, just because somebody's your family doesn't mean you need to like them, you know?
yeah.
That might be controversial, but I just think it's like, I'm just so proud of them for standing up for what was right and for creating their own lives. Like, imagine being Harry. Like, this organization or the royal family literally killed his mother. Like, the press, and he loves this woman Meghan so much, and he has a child with him, and they're having another child, and they're having a daughter, and I hope that they name her Diana. um but they're having, and like, good for them for getting out of there. Like, that would have been so hard to break out of that bubble. And I don't know what it would take for them to go back, but I can't see it happening at this point.
No, not for a while.
You know what, to bring up one point, I don't think they would go back now I think about it, because I do remember something from the interview where she did state that they weren't going to pay for security.
Yeah, so that she doesn't have any security. They got all their security taken away when they moved to Canada because they moved to Victoria for a bit, and then who did they move in with in the U.S.?
I think it was
I can't
Tyler
remember.
Perry.
Yeah, it was Tyler Perry. Right. They moved in with
Yeah.
Tyler
Tyler
Perry
Perry,
in
I
the
didn't know
U.S.
that.
and gave him
Yeah, the
protection.
actor.
Yeah, but the only money they're living off of right now is the money that Diana left Harry. You know, so
I think they'll be okay financially. I think at the end of the
they'll be
day, I
fine.
think
They'll be fine financially. Like they started their Archwell Media company, and it's really cool to see the things they're doing. My parents are currently watching Suits. They're like super into it, so I see Megan on my screen all the time. Um, yeah, but I don't. I don't know why they'd want to go back after the way that they were treated. There'd have to be a lot of changes in the royal family. And I don't think my mom's a health coach, and she always says, if somebody's not ready, willing, or able to do the work, there's not going to be a change. And I don't think the royal family is ready, willing, or able to do the work. Yeah, so.
That's a great point, Meredith. That's a great point. And you know what, guys? That's it for today's podcast. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with our first ever guest, Meredith Omstead. So, Meredith, how will people be able to follow your work? What's your social media accounts? Let everyone know how they can follow you and follow your journey on this journalism.
My journalism journey. You can follow me on Twitter at Mayor Omstead. That's MEREOMSTEAD. That's pretty much where you can find me. My Instagram's not really like work related, and I don't think anybody uses Facebook anymore, and I don't really use TikTok. I've won TikTok from about a year ago, so Twitter is the place to find me. Thank you so much for having me. I had so much fun talking about all this. I feel like I haven't really had a good political conversation with anybody since we were in school, because I don't really report on this stuff, and my family's great, but they don't really... I'm just usually talking to them. There's not really a conversation. So this was really great. Thank you.
Well, Meredith, you're welcome back anytime. So, guys, let us know what you guys think, in our Twitter or whatever. And I hope you do enjoy today's episode and with our first ever guest. And do follow us on our Twitter account. We will put that in the link description below on YouTube, Spotify, and on